thanks for coming. This is our third Shed Talk. If you've been around for the first two, thank you. In this one, we're going to talk about Dakar and beyond. So I'm delighted, thank you guys for coming, that we've got Chris Evans, who is Dakar Rep, and years and years and years in the Dakar, and Vanessa Ruck, the girl on a bike, who is embarking for the last 2 years on her journey into rally riding. So we're going to talk about the Dakar, the wider rally riding sport, and hopefully it'll be a nice shed talk. So, Chris, kick us off. Tell us about you and your experience with the Dakar.
Okay, so about 30 years ago, which is a while ago now, I swept. In those days, they had about 250 bikes. There was no selection procedure, so they took people like me, average riders, but reasonable mechanics, and we'd ride the route with the competitors. It was, for me, it's just a cheap way of riding the route. Yeah. So I did that 1 year for a bloke called Cyril Neveu. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Cyril Neveu was the first man to ever win the Dakar on a motorcycle, on an XT500, and he won it 5 times. And he, like a lot of them, went on to run his own rally. And at the end of that rally, he said to me, "Oh, you speak English." He said, "You're not riding a bike next year. I've got other things for you." Because at the time, French people just didn't speak much English. So that's how it started. And so I worked for him for a couple of years. And then I was approached by the Dakar. And I went to work for them in 1997. So 1997, so I calculated last night, I missed 1 rally, so I've done 26, I've worked on 26 Dakars.
Okay. A lot of Dakars.
It's a lot of Dakars, and I was their press officer, then I went to be press officer for KTM, then I became manager for Cyril Desprez, and we won 5 Dakars together, so that was nice. Well, not me personally, although,
it's a team
it's
sport.
A team sport, yeah. And then I went to work for Yamaha with Cyril, and then he left to drive cars. I stayed 1 year with them, and then had 1 year off. And then they asked me back, and my job now is motorcycle competitor relations. So I'm employed by the organisers of the Dakar, and they attached me to the FIM, so the federation. So all the federation problems, of which there are many, is me that has to sort them out. So there you go.
Cool. And Vanessa, tell us about your journey into rally riding.
So, yeah, I'm Vanessa Ruck, also known as the girl on a bike, and I'd pretty much describe myself as a rider, racer, and adventurer on 2 wheels, and more recently I've doubled to 4 wheels, which is a little bit terrifying and very exciting, but I've actually not been riding motorcycles that long. I had a life-changing accident in 2014 as a cyclist, and I've since had a reconstructed right shoulder and right hip. And during my recovery from that, which kind of took 7 years of 7 surgeries, I discovered motorbikes and realized that they're a little bit addictive. They breed, so you get one and then you want another one. And I was actually bedbound after my 3rd surgery when I came up with this genius idea that I should get a dirt bike. 5 months till I could even sit on it, but it was there as a goal. I remember the first time I took that dirt bike green laning, it basically made me realize that I had no idea how to ride a motorbike. Who in here has ridden off-road? Oh, not, okay, that's a fair few hands. So you'll appreciate the difference between riding on tarmac to riding off-road. Like, it's wild. Everything just wants the bike to do everything that you're not thinking it's going to do. And I realized very quickly I was addicted to this. It was very fun. But at no point when I got on that first dirt bike, which was about 6.5 years ago, did I go, I'm going to start doing extreme desert rallies. It's been a progressive journey of pushing my skills, learning, and massively moving my comfort zone. I remember when a curb terrified me, and now I will ride over a log.
Well, you just got back a couple of weeks ago from, tell us about that.
So yeah, about 3 weeks ago I got back from the Morocco Desert Challenge, which is an 8-day, 2,500 kilometers moving bivouac. You sleep in a tent, you pack it up, put it in a box, get on your bike, race through the desert upwards of sort of 500 kilometers a day, following a piece of paper on your handlebars. Don't forget that rally is navigation as well, and you've got little symbols, compass headings, a compass, you're following them in sand dunes. It was brutal. That race had a 40% finish rate in the moto category, massively impacted by the fact that a heat wave hit North Africa at the time, so the peak riding temperature was 52 degrees. And I don't know if you've ever sat in a hot tub, 42 degrees in a hot tub. You don't sit in there very long, do you, before you start to get a headache? Driving on a motorbike in full kit, racing through sand that pretty much wants your bike. So my rally bike's over here. Your rally bike is just like, I want to be a dead elephant and lie on my side. And you're like, no, we've got to keep going. It's really hot. It was really intense. I look back on it with amazing kind of positivity and energy now, but there are massive moments through that where you are digging into your reserves big time to keep going.
That was in Tunisia?
That was Morocco.
That was
Sorry,
Morocco.
did I say Tunisia?
No, I think you said
Morocco
Morocco.
Desert
I might get it
Challenge.
wrong. But, and the Dakar started journey-wise going Paris to Dakar, right? And how long was that, the route?
Right. Okay. So I did that when I started. It was doing that route.
Yeah.
So and I think it went to about 2000. So in 2008, every year I think so. I did it for about 12 years then, and every year we got held up by bandits, which is a tradition in Africa, in the Sahara. What you need to know in Sahara. So when they used to have the camel caravans. A camel caravan has to traverse the Sahara at a certain rate, otherwise everybody dies. I think they have about 15 days to go across it. So you used to have these group of people who used to follow the caravans, and because the caravan couldn't stop, they'd pick off the stragglers. That's how they made a living. Yeah. So that's existed ever since camel caravans existed. So when the Dakar came along, they just switched, and there's not many camel caravans anymore, so they just switched the focus from camel caravans to the Dakar. So, and they used to do the same thing. They used to wait for the competitors to go through, and then the assistants, they'd get the last assistance vehicles. And the last year we did it, they had 4 trucks and 3 assistance cars, and a bloke on a motorbike, so he must have been pissed off.
Yeah.
On a DR350, he'd got all that way. So then there were some people attacked as well and killed.
Right.
So before the Dakar in Africa was supported by the French Foreign Ministry, and they said because without their say-so, there's no insurance, there's no nothing. And we used to have French special forces following us around and stuff like that. And so they pulled the plug on it in 2008. I remember we all went to the south of Portugal for the start of the rally, and then the French government said, no, you can't go.
And so since then, it moved to South America?
So then it went to South America. Well, missed, obviously, 2008, didn't go anywhere. 2009, we went to South, and that was just amazing because in Africa, there weren't a lot of spectators, and if they weren't that keen on us anyway. And then we went to South America, and the South Americans love motorsport, especially the Argentinians. And we left Buenos Aires, and I remember 50 kilometers from the first bivouac, all the roads were gridlocked. You just couldn't advance. We were going down, they were having barbecues by the side of the road, giving us steaks through the window. It was a very different experience. Yeah. So we stayed there, till about 4 years ago, and then we went to Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Basically what happened is the economic model of the Dakar is like the Tour de France. It's the same company that runs it. On the Tour de France, each town in France pays for the Tour de France to stop for the night because it's boosts their economy. So they were doing the same thing with the South American government. So each South American government was giving them not insubstantial amounts of money, and everybody got what they were looking for. It boosted tourism massively in places like Peru, but politically it became unacceptable because these countries were in recession, so they pulled the plug on it. Plus, weirdly, when we were making the route through South America, we kept on discovering archaeological finds, and we had an archaeologist with us making the route. Right. So, okay, we can't go there. So we found hundreds and hundreds of places that they didn't know existed. But so we were a victim of our own success. So we just ran out of places to go. So when the Saudis came up with, a big wedge of money, that's where we went.
And so, actually, let's talk a little bit about last year's Dakar, because one of the things that blew my mind on it was how it can be that many days, 5,000 kilometers, and at the end of it, in the bikes, it's less than a minute.
Yeah, 43 seconds.
43 seconds.
Yeah, this is a big problem. A big, big problem for us because, it was a race that was designed to be won in hours.
Right.
Not seconds. And although we have a lot of technology, a lot of equipment on each bike, just to give you an example, so this year to increase safety, we have a problem with safety on the Dakar. It's a dangerous race. So one of the things was decided was to limit the speed to 150 kilometers an hour. I'm sure Vanessa will tell you 150 kilometers an hour on a dirt bike is still extremely fast. But, so we had this. So the only way the factory team said, okay, we're up for this, but we need some way. We don't want the riders looking at their speedometer. They've got enough things to, we need an engine management system. So the only way to do that is with a GPS aerial. So for the first time ever, so one of my jobs is to give the riders time penalties for speeding in villages. They might be limited to 30k or 50k, 60k. They see that on their road book. So they didn't have any data for that. I just tell them, you've got speed. Well, I didn't. The technical people said, you've got a speeding fine. Yeah? And then if they weren't happy, they'd come to me to complain about it. So when they had the aerial for the speed control, they suddenly had their own data. And they suddenly realized that where the organizers' equipment said they were speeding, their equipment said they weren't speeding. So we had this was a lot of unhappiness. And if you think a speeding fine could be 1 minute, right, and you're winning by 43 seconds, you know. So this was
the margins are so fine.
Well, the thing I found out is KTM, can I say that, mounted their aerial on silent blocks, on rubber blocks, yeah? So I also found out that if the speed impulsion is taken as the aerial is vibrating in one direction, that could add 10 kilometers an hour or take off 10 kilometers an hour from their speeding data. So where they say that they weren't speeding, if their aerial was vibrating in the wrong direction to my speeding aerial, you'd have a 10 kilometer an hour difference. But in the end, we just had to say, look, sorry, and their technology is always the case. KTM, HRC had much better technology than we did, I'll be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But there had to be a reference, and ours was a reference, and they had to lump it. Fortunately, the battle became down between all KTMs. If there was an HRC bike, a Honda bike, it would have been
hard.
A big problem.
Yeah, we're talking about the bikes. We've got, outside as we were coming into the room, I'm sure you saw it, we've got Vanessa's bike, and we also have Patsy Quick's bike. And Patsy, who is involved with the Desert Rose team in the rally room at the front of the show that you might have seen, we've got lots of rally bikes in there. She was the first, I'm right in saying this, first British woman to compete in the Dakar and complete the Dakar?
Yeah. And I operated on her spleen.
You operated on her spleen?
Yeah.
Common practice in the Dakar?
No. So in 2000, the Dakar was going to Egypt, or through Egypt, and somebody from the organisers called me and said, Patsy's coming in with a ruptured spleen, we think it's a ruptured spleen, and we want you to go with her and two doctors to a nearby hospital. And so we got into the pickup with her on the back, me and the two doctors, drove to the hospital. When we got there, the hospital was empty. There was nobody there. It was a fictitious hospital, probably some sort of funding scam or something. And so the two doctors, two women, said, right, we're going to have to operate. And so they got their head torches out. And when I pick a Netflix film, it has to be maximum 13 or I can't watch it. So I'm not good with blood. And they go, Chris, you're going to have to help. So anyway, so I saw the inside of Patsy, and she survived, yeah. And when these doctors, I still see them on rallies. Really? And they still go to me, how's Patsy? And I realised afterwards that is the most extreme operation they ever did, or hope.
Crikey. So. Bloody hell. It's a dangerous sport, isn't it? I mean, sorry, going back to the bikes, I wanted to talk about bikes for a little bit. We've got in the rally room I think it's an 80s BMW that we've got in there, because it used to be the big...
It's a HPN Made in by a HPM
Gaston
factory.
Hill.
Yeah, I think it's about 1982. Yeah.
And it's amazing how the journey of the bike, there's huge inspiration, I think, nowadays in custom culture and even the bikes that the manufacturers are making from those 80s Dakar-style bikes and that enduro stuff. I mean, we've got an electric bike in the colours of a Tenere in the rally room as well. I think there's huge inspiration from that. But the bikes of today, Vanessa, can you talk us through your bike a little bit, what it started as and what it is now?
So Big Buddy, the white KTM over there, that's my full rally replica bike. It's a KTM 450, and that's basically a factory Dakar equivalent bike. It pretty much comes ready to go. Key things with that is the size of the fuel tank for the range. You've got the massive tower on the front of the bike, which houses all of your navigation system, the emergency systems that you need. There's tracking systems when you go into these races, because if you have a crash a few hundred kilometers into the desert with no one around, you want the electronics on your bike to send signals for the helicopter to come just because you've crashed. Also, if you need to call for help, it's on there. You've then got another electronic system, which is your navigation tracking system for your sort of position in the rally, which knows where you are and tracks your waypoints. The navigation is about the accuracy, and if you are going lost, it won't sort of register the waypoints. And we can talk about the road book if you wanted as well.
Yeah.
I think key things...
Because the road book's paper, isn't it? It's paper on a scroll.
Yeah, I do a lot of schools talks, and when you start turning around to these kids and saying there's no Google Maps, there's no GPS, they're like, what? Paper? And you literally have a switch for your thumb, and it scrolls this roll of paper. And if you go over to my bike, you'll see it. There's rows of tulips with little symbols and compass bearings, your kilometers. It's all in French abbreviations as well, just to add to the complexity. And I don't speak French. That's because of the origins of the system of the Dakar. And you're following that whilst trying to stay upright and race at race pace through some pretty challenging terrain. And some of these races do have really grueling terrain. I remember some days where I've done Red Bull Romaniacs, and I'm thinking, why am I not on a tiny little two-stroke right now?
Did you do Red Bull? What did you ride in Red Bull Romaniacs?
I was on a Husqvarna 250 two-stroke, so a small little lethal weapon.
And that's like hard enduro, isn't it?
Yeah, where you look at the terrain and go, I can't walk through there, and then suddenly you're like, I'm on a 100-kilo motorbike trying to get through it.
Yeah.
Questioning life choices, but it's a lot of fun.
But there's no nav. Is there nav on that?
There is. We have like a little Garmin on your handlebar for that, so you'll be following a dot.
Yeah.
But the track's really well marked with little flags, so you could technically do that without using it. But by using the GPS, you can get a bit of a heads-up warning that corner's a really sharp hairpin versus a straight, so you can keep more pace by using the navigation more.
And so why, when we've got those two bikes there and the huge advances in tech from one to the other, do they both still have paper on them?
You're not for much longer, huh?
Not for much longer?
Next year on the Dakar, they'll have a digital.
Will they?
They've already got them in cars, yeah.
Okay.
Interestingly, I don't know, when do you get your road book on a rally, on the Morocco Desert Challenge? You get it at night or in the next morning?
You got it the night before.
Right.
On that one. Some of them you get it 15 minutes before your start time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of colouring that's often done. You don't get that now.
They used to. So the thing is, for the privateers, not so much of a problem, but the factory riders used to come in and they would spend up to 3 hours a night marking up their road books with colours. And I mean, I don't know how much time you probably didn't have that much time to spend on.
So I did my first rally about 19 months ago, and I knew that we were moving towards digital. And I kind of looked at all these people with their colouring pen. I mean, they full on in the desert with a pencil case with highlighters, and they'll go like a green arrow if it's left, and a red one if it's right, and a blue one for something else. Literally highlighters and colours, and they'll sit there for hours going through. And if you've got a scroll of paper that could be 15 metres long, there might be 200, 300 tulips on there. I don't know about your brain, but there's no way tomorrow I'm going to go, oh yeah, I remember that left. There's no chance I'm going to remember it. And I kind of figured that soon we're going to be going digital, so I won't be able to use highlighters. So why ever start?
So you keep it plain?
So I don't do anything. I'll do the amends, because there's often amends the night before. And I think part of that's just the rally. They like to just put jumps for you to hoop through.
Nice.
So
you know what I meant?
Yeah.
There's a lot of psychological elements to rally where they're trying to make things complicated, fatigue you. They're long days. It's about the endurance. You know, if you're not at your start time on time, there's going to be penalties. There's lots of little things you've got to think about. And obviously the move to digital means they won't be able to do amends to you, and you won't be there with your pen trying to be like, oh, it's a left there, or it's a different cap heading, and scribbling it through.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the first question was, but I don't colour things in. Because I valued eating food and trying to get sleep earlier.
I think the thing is, for the people trying to win it, well, what they used to do, then they'd photograph the roadbook, send it to somebody in Europe with a very good internet connection, and then they would try and transpose that onto Google Maps. And then, so already the top rider might leave the bivouac at 4 o'clock in the morning. So they have to get up at 2:30 in the morning to talk by Skype with the bloke in Europe who's Google mapped it. And what they were looking for was little navigation cuts that they could make, because as we said, they're only 43 seconds ahead. So any little cut they can make could make the difference.
Ping the waypoint.
So in the roadbook, you can see where the tube line has a waypoint. So if there's 10 tulips between 2 waypoints, if you're looking at Google, maybe actually you could just do a straight line between the two and cut 20 seconds off.
And when you talk about the Dakar and this thing of the factory teams and the privateers, because there's this sort of romance to the Dakar. I mean, if you drive a car and you're half decent, you don't think, oh, one day I could be in Formula One. Whereas there's people who ride bikes and ride dirt bikes who think, oh, if I really committed to this, I could maybe one day participate in the Dakar. And I know that's kind of a romantic ideal. And do you feel like that's changed, the sort of privateer versus the...
Well, there's still I'd say there's, like, if you want to be vulgar about it, there's 3 kind of levels. There's the factory riders, maybe 16 of them are getting paid to do that job. So you're never going to beat them because they're down the gym all day or they're practicing their navigation. Then you've got maybe 30 riders below them that would like to be factory riders, like semi-professional if you like.
Yeah.
And then you've got people like Vanessa, whose ambitions are still ridiculous, but their main ambition, I'm guessing, is to just finish, isn't it? I mean, which is already, I say just finish, it's a huge ambition. But at the same time, they might be 110th, but they don't want to be 111th. You know, it's so...
I came 25th, by the way, in my last rally.
Right.
Nice. Yes.
So, yeah.
But do you think do you think it's moving more towards motorsport and less that romantic ideal of I could do that one day?
Okay, so before you used to be able to just pay your money on the Dakar and turn up, and I mean, I saw people that couldn't get around the prologue, which is 10 kilometres, so they'd have paid quite a substantial amount of money and didn't even finish the prologue. So now there's a selection process, which is becoming progressively harder. I mean, my job is supposedly to recruit competitors for the Dakar in certain countries, but really, as far as bikes are concerned, mainly I'm trying to put them off.
Right, okay.
Because it costs a lot of money, as Vanessa will tell you. If you want to do the Dakar, you've got to do a minimum of one other World Championship rally and finish it with a good margin of comfort.
So no one going out on a bike is not incredibly capable when they do the Dakar?
Yeah, and it didn't used to be the case, and they had a few, tragic incidents, and, we don't live in the same time as we used to live 30 years ago. Health and safety has reached the Dakar and Rally Raid as well a little bit. So, yeah, now they're super, super picky about who they take. And the other thing is, and most sport, there's always an element of money involved. Bikes are logistically so heavy for rallies. For example, you need minimum of 1 doctor for every 20 riders. On the Dakar this year, we had 14 helicopters and they're not worried about the cars. The cars, very occasionally have an accident. So those 14 helicopters are there for 120 bikes. Now, a helicopter costs €1,000 an hour to fly. You do the maths,
Yeah.
So they lose money on the bikes. Yeah. Plus, there's the psychological toll for the organisers of running those bikes and worrying about them. And then I worry constantly. I have constant, because of my job as competitor relations, I can see them, they come and see me, they've got problems, whether they're privateers or factory riders. And, you know, I've sent people off in the morning. I have to be at the start of the race every morning. And you think, you know that this guy's worried about something, or you worry about them, So there is a toll. So in terms of TV images, if you have like 200 or 50, it's looking the same, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
So there's that aspect of it. You don't make any money. It's very difficult for us to run it logistically and mentally. There's a mental... I mean, I think you did the Morocco rally. Apparently the bloke doesn't like bikes, does he? Gert. The Morocco Desert Challenge.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, but
he likes...
Does
he
like
likes bikes, but he knows that we are very vulnerable in the desert.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very
you're
extreme.
out there, aren't you?
When something goes wrong, you've got no shade, you haven't got backup water, there's a little stash of food, you haven't got, air-cooled systems and vests on, you're just a little sitting duck, vulnerable with no roll cage.
But beyond the Dakar, in terms of your rally riding experience, what was the first one you did?
So I definitely would admit that I kind of just went headfirst into the deep end.
You fast-tracked this, haven't you?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the way I went. It was a little bit terrifying. I pretty much had a nervous breakdown on the start line. This was in the Middle East in Qatar. I did a 2-day Baja. And you can see on my YouTube video the full breakdown. It was great. But I went there with Patsy Quick. And she knew me as a rider because I used Desert Rose for Red Bull Romaniacs. And she believed in me. And she said, we'll ride it together. So it was like 2 girls going into the desert. What I didn't realize is that Patsy Quick is an absolute total badass and knows how to train people really well. So we're going to ride this together. We're going to be a team on the start line. It's like, cool, Vanessa, go do the rally. I'll be behind you. You're on your own, but I'll be behind you. And I'm like, what? I'm going straight in the deep end. And it was another one of those really brutal rallies. I think 46% finished this one because it was another silly heat wave in Qatar, and it was very hard. We finished it. But it was too late. I'd already caught the bug.
Yeah,
it's like the rally addiction. There's something about going into the desert and having just nothingness. A piece of paper. Okay, I had Patsy behind me, so I wasn't completely on my own, but you still feel like you're on your own, and it's so addictive. You're just riding for hours. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's painful. The sand dunes were a learning curve. I'd never ridden in sand. I'd never ridden in dunes. I'd never been in the desert, and I'd never done road book navigation. This is where I say I threw myself in the deep end. And I just went out to Qatar and did it. And I figured the best way to learn is to get up and go and do it. The worst that's going to happen is I don't finish, but I'll learn something.
That was the first one?
That was the first one.
And how many have you done in 18 months?
8.
Cool.
And they're all multi-day.
Yeah.
So Tunisia Desert Challenge and the Morocco Desert Challenge have been by far the hardest.
Yeah.
There's some very good stories if you want to investigate any of those. They're all on my YouTube channel as well. But I just think it's safe to say that there's something about being on a motorcycle where you have a huge day ahead of you. You're following complicated navigation. You're trying to tackle the terrain, trying to ride fast. It is terrifying, full of adrenaline. It's painful, it's addictive. You'll have moments where you dug your bike in, like fesh. You'll be riding along. This is Tunisia. The sand in Tunisia is unreal. You'll be riding along, and the next thing you know, you're sat on your bum like that in front of your motorbike. And you're like, what are you doing back there? And its nose has just gone into the fesh, and you've gone bam. And it's so quick. You feel like a 2-year-old. But it doesn't hurt. You're in sand. You get back up, and then you've got to dig your bike out. And the best day is to actually put it on its side and then pick it up again, put it on its side, pick it up again. It's just so addictive. I ended up doing one on 1,000 Juniors in October last year where Triumph decided to challenge me to do it on a Tiger 900 Rally Pro. That bike is 4.5 times my body weight, and I was hitting the dunes.
Crikey.
It was brutal.
You prefer riding the KTM, I take it?
That bike is like a dream.
Yeah.
It fits like a glove.
It's built
for it. When you hit the dunes, you tend to ride that bike at about 1,500 revs higher than you'd ride an enduro bike. And you hit the dunes and it's just like pop, 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 pop. Oh, it's gorgeous. You're like pop over. If you go to the rally area of Desert Rose, there's some footage of me riding on the screen and it's just a dream. It's like a glove for the desert, that bike, until he's lying on his side. But then that's my fault, so I shouldn't have put him there.
And then you've got to get it out of the sand.
Yeah. Thankfully though, so Morocco was the first race I've done on him. I only had 3 kind of big drops in the dunes, and you know, you have to spin them around and get it back the right way, get him back up again, and keep going.
And I think now, I want to just hear some stories. We've had a good chat. We had a good chat last night. And talking about getting stuck, tell us the story about getting stuck in the mud that you told me last night.
Okay, yeah, so I think it was in 2010, I'm thinking 2011. So KTM had pulled the plug on the Dakar for 2 reasons. There was a big recession, global recession, and the organisers wanted to impose a 450 limit. Now, a lot of manufacturers had a 450 enduro bike that could be made into an enduro bike, and only KTM had a 690, which is the bike that Patsy's got there, and which is a difficult bike to ride, big bike. So they introduced this 450 limit. KTM weren't happy because they were selling adventure bikes on the back of the 690. So they said, we're not coming. So we managed to get the budget from Red Bull that they were giving KTM. We rented a truck from KTM. And at the time, it was Mark Comer, Cyril Dupre. They were won it each 5 times over a 10-year period. So, so we, after the rest day, first day after the rest day, Mark Comer goes through. First of all, the boss of the rally goes off in his helicopter, goes and has a look at something, comes back, says something to Mark, says something to Cyril. They both go off. Mark goes round this huge mud hole, which you can't actually see, and Cyril goes straight into it and over the handlebars. And he's stuck in it. And another rider, Paulo Gonçalves, comes along, helps Cyril pull his bike out. And then Cyril, rather than help Paulo with his bike,
he's stuck as well,
he's stuck as well, just leaves him. So this is all on telly and in Portugal. I mean, it was so bad we had to shut down all the social media thing.
Yeah.
And Cyril rings me, which he's not supposed to do, from the special. He goes, okay, so I got stuck for 12 minutes in a bog. You need to go and get to the organisers and get the time back. So I'm saying, well, Cyril, it's an off-road race. You got stuck in some mud. It's going to be a difficult one. But I went to see them, and effectively, there was a problem. I think what happened, but I'm not sure, was that the boss of the Dakar said to Mark, be careful, there's a mud hole. And to Cyril, he said something. I don't know what he said. Anyway, the other thing that saved us is that they had to reroute the rally after the first 8 people got stuck in the bog. So once you've changed the route, then you can, because you have tracking devices, you can see the time lost, you can give the time back. So I managed to get back 10 minutes time. So I went back to Cyril, he said, so, how are we doing? And I said, we got 10 minutes back. I mean, I was just so happy. And who gets 10 minutes back on an off-road race because they got stuck in some mud? And he turned to me and he said, well, I was there for 12 minutes. So if I lose this rally by 2 minutes, it's your fault. I'm sure you watch the Dakar. I hope you watch the Dakar. And the people who win this, they're not like you or me. That's what that story illustrates.
Yeah,
they are barking mad. And the only one who's not have you ever heard of this guy called Stefan Petrenzel? Who's the guy who's won 6 Dakars in cars, and 6 on bikes, 8 in cars. This guy is so talented, he never had to be weird to win. Do you know what I mean? All weird. The others are barking mad.
Driven. And he could have helped the other guy out. He could have helped him out, but he wouldn't have won.
When I looked at it the other night actually, preparing for a little bit for this, and I was embarrassed for him, for me, for everybody involved. And it looked awful, and it was awful.
Right.
But what you have to remember, he won it 5 times.
Yeah.
He trained all year for that. He risked his life. And that year, he put his own money into it because KTM pulled out, and he won it.
Yeah.
So,
if you want to win. And talking about camaraderie or lack of camaraderie, how do you find it on a rally? Like relationships you make with the other competitors. How's that? What's your experience been of that?
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Especially, I think as a female in the Bivouac, there often aren't so many females. Like Tunisia, I was the first female to ever enter and ever finish.
And how big a field is that in the Tunisia rally? How many competitors?
Anywhere from 70 to 100 bikes.
Right.
So a decent. I mean,
Yeah.
the Morocco Desert Challenge I've just done is the second biggest rally raid in the world after the Dakar as far as numbers. So there's decent volumes of competitors.
How many women did that one?
3.
Right.
3.
But in the Bivouac,
In the Bivouac, you get more females in the four-wheel vehicles, especially on the navigation side. You get some drivers, and actually there is a all-female truck crew coming soon, which I'm so excited to see. So they've got the driver, the mechanic, and the navigator in the massive trucks, like the lorry ones. Absolutely amazing to see a group of females doing that. But there aren't so many females, which means the reality is I often get asked, are you doing the female route, or you're on the female bike, and you're like, no, there is no gender in this.
Yeah,
we're out there doing extreme desert rallies. You're doing the same route on the same bike, carrying the same equipment, same amount of time, same stony desert tent on the floor. There's no princess parking. You don't even think about going to the toilet. Like how easy a guy can just get off the bike, or sometimes some of the guys don't even get off the bike, they'll just kind of squirt it sideways. Some of them wear a condom with a pipe, so they don't even have to get off. They'll just pee riding along, and it just comes out of their boot. I have to get off the bike, find something to stand my bike on, because he's not going to stand up without me, like something to wedge the kickstand. I've got to take my trousers off, not off, but you know how to go for a pee. You get a point.
Sorry, some of the guys were...
time I lose for that.
Yeah.
But if I didn't, and I wasn't drinking enough, I'm in a lot more trouble, because the amount you have to hydrate, because you are sweating. Like some days you're drinking anywhere from 12, 15, 16 litres in the extreme heat we had in Morocco.
Yeah.
With all the electrolytes. So you're drinking a lot. I don't know what the question was. I think I went off onto peeing.
I think we were going to talk about camaraderie. And people, have you had a good experience of that? I'm
getting jealous that they have a little pipe, sorry. The camaraderie is amazing. It's super friendly. When you come into the checkpoints, the happiness on the team's faces when they're seeing you carrying on, getting to the end of the day. The energy when you've got an issue with your bike or something's going wrong, everyone's willing to look through their toolbox or their spare box, see if they can help you. It's just a really amazing feeling. Because we're all there for fun. It's a holiday, right?
Yeah.
And we all know how intense it is doing it and how much we have fought to even make it to the start line. And it's a very supportive community. And then as the female, you get a little bit of an extra kind of high five because they're like, I can't believe you're out here as well. Because it is a little bit harder because I'm generally smaller, lighter than the average male. But I don't think gender matters. So all the girls in here, we can do it too.
Excellent.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
And tell us some of your stories from some of the rallies. What was the one? The Tunisian one.
The Tunisian one, okay. So, yeah, Tunisia was really hard. You get the idea that these rallies aren't a walk in the park. So I probably want to really quickly step back a moment and say that any one of you could go and do a rally. You don't have to go in the name for the Dakar. There's loads of far more manageable, easier rallies. Don't necessarily go straight into the desert. You can do some in Europe. Companies like Desert Rose have training camps. It's completely achievable. It doesn't need to be this big elitist thing. Yeah, rallies are awesome.
We're doing a rally later in the year with Desert Rose in Greece, and we did one last year with our members, and sort of people starting to dip their toe into this world and see what it's like. And I'm going on our one that we're doing in October. I'm going to do sort of half road, half off road on my big adventure bike, and I know that's a totally different thing.
But it's still an adventure.
Wait. And then
but you can't dip your toe in. Your leg will get sucked in, and then you'll just be in there, and you'll be like, where's my next rally? You could come do the Bosnia rally with me in July. There's a couple of spaces left. There's loads of ways to get into rally. But going back to it, when you go into the more extreme, longer distance, moving bivouac, desert rallies, they are hard. The finish rates start to decrease. And there's a reason why they are some of the toughest endurance races in the world and why it's so satisfying when you make the finish line. So I'm not going to tell you if I've made the finish line of Tunisia yet. Oh, no, I already did. I told you I was the first female to finish. Spoiler, I've ruined my story already. Anyway, day 3, we had a really tough day of dunes. And the sand in Tunisia is horribly fluffy and light and evil. It was really, really hot. I think that day we had a total of about 85K of the big monstrous dunes in Tunisia. And I reached rock bottom 5 times in this day, where I was like on my hands and knees, panting next to my bike, done. I think there was a 3-hour period where my heart rate didn't go below 150. And I would sit down by my bike being like, I'm out, I can't move. And I'd sit there, I'd have some water, eat some food, and I'd be like, come on, Vanessa, let's just do another 5K, let's do this. So I get back up, and 6K from the end of the dunes, the electrics on my bike went. 6K from the end of the dune section. Anyway, I was 11 and a half hours in on this day. Just to put this day into context, 32 vehicles got rescued. I was one of the 16 bikes that got rescued, but I got the furthest of those 16 bikes that got rescued, so I'm going to claim that. Anyway, so it's about 45 minutes of sunlight left at this point. My bike's not going to carry on, and I'm realizing that I've got a night in the dunes. And I don't know about you, but the boogeyman, Sandman, is real. I was going to be terrified. At this point in my life, I couldn't be home alone without like a dog or a person. I mean, being in the dunes for my own, I was going to have a breakdown. So I was like, right, we got to go into emergency planning mode. I get my emergency kit out. There's loads of safety regulations in these rallies of the stuff you've got to carry. So you've got lighters and emergency blankets and spare hydration stuff, all that kind of stuff. And I'm setting it all out. I've got enough water to sip overnight. I've got enough food to have a protein bar at about 9 o'clock, one at maybe 2 o'clock, one in the morning, and then hopefully they'll come and save me in first light. I spent half an hour, actually, first of all, I took my clothes off, not all of it, dirty people, down to my base layers, because I was soaking wet with sweat, and I laid out in the sun so that it would dry, because it gets cold at night in the desert. And then I was like, I've got half an hour to gather as much stuff that I can find to burn. So I'm like clambering around, not losing sight of my bike, because my bike sat there bleeping, which is telling the organizers where I am. I make this massive pile of stuff to burn, and then as the sun's going down, I'm like, right, better get it started. And you'd think dry stuff in the desert would light really easily, but I had a moment where I was like, this fire's not going to start. But I always had petrol, so it was okay. Anyway, I got the fire starting. I'll try and accelerate my story. And then I have this fire, and I'm lying there, and I kept starting to panic, because I'm in the desert on my own. You hear stuff, you see stuff, you feel things moving. And I was like, you know what? I do a lot of mindfulness to manage my hip pain. And I was like, you know what? I'm all right. I've got fire. I'm not on my own because I've got the warmth. I've got the crackling. The animals aren't going to come near me because they don't like fire. The organizer's going to come and get me. I've got food and drink. You know what? I'm all right. And I lay there trying to watch the stars. I saw shooting stars. It sounds really romantic. It wasn't. It was horrible. And then I'd sort of panic and I'd be like, no, I've got to close my eyes. I can't be here. I've just got to close them, and I'd sort of sleep. At about 7.5 hours later, I start to see this light kind of popping up, and I'm like, is this an oasis thing where, you know, you're in the desert and you see water? Yeah. And it turns out it was a sweeper truck coming to get me. I was like, this is amazing. They rock up and they're like, you've got a fire. What? And apparently they've never seen someone light a fire. But I thought, well, why else would we carry a lighter? I'm not a smoker. Anyway, they then get me back to the bivouac, which took 3.5 hours through these dunes in the sweeper truck. I thought I was going to die in the sweeper truck. It was mental. Get back into the bivouac at 3:30 in the morning, hand my bike over to Desert Rose Racing, who are like, right, go to bed and wake up like your bike's fixed. We're on it. Back in my tent, 2 hours sleep, wake back up, bike's fixed. They're an amazing team. Back on the start line, and off I go back into the desert. On 2 hours sleep. And I'd raced for 11.5 hours the day before and had a night in the dunes and a roller coaster sweeper truck. But it's mental what the body can do when you demand of it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm back off into the desert. The story's, I'll get to end in a minute, but there's another day.
No, you're good.
10:30 in the morning, so I've been racing for about 4.5 hours at this point. Burn my clutch out in the dunes. That's me stopped. Totally pilot error. But it was really exciting because it was 10:30 in the morning. All the buggies were coming past, and then the trucks and the side-by-sides and the trucks, the big, big trucks. And I had front row seats. I was watching like a Defender get dug out for about 45 minutes. A buggy got stuck over there. They were all throwing water and food at me because they have to carry spares because we can't carry extra. And it was pretty awesome. And then I stopped hearing engines, and it went really quiet, and you start to realize you're in the middle of the dunes all on your own again. This isn't so great, and it's 46 degrees. I didn't have any shade. The sand was so soft that I couldn't get my bike to stand upright, because I hadn't had a clutch, so I had my little tinfoil blanket over me. And after about 7 hours, I started to realize I wasn't okay. And it felt like I had a helmet on, and someone had a branch, and they were just smacking me on the head. And I realized that, yeah, this is time to tap out. And someone, unfortunately, had died a couple of days before from the heat. So there's another heat wave hitting this one. Something about North Africa, I don't know. So I called for the helicopter. I had 5 of the biggest panic attacks I've ever had in my life by that bike, where I realized that my mindfulness, no amount of calming myself down, made me feel like I was okay. Like there was a sandstorm, so I was in like this, sorry, that went really loud. I was in like, in my scarf trying to breathe in a bubble, and I wasn't okay. I got in a lot of trouble from the medic team because I didn't hit the button soon enough. Let's just say that. The helicopter arrived and I didn't die, but it got quite close. That next day, my bike was sort of recovered and brought back again. And I remember waking up from a night terror in the middle of the night, being stuck in the desert for the 3rd time, and I went, that's it, I'm done. I've entered the race. I can't do this. I'm out. Eventually got myself back to sleep, woke up in the morning, and I was like, where's my bike?
Off we go.
And off we went again. And I'd signed up for it. I knew it was going to be hard, and I just carried on. I fought on, and I made the finish line, so I was really, really proud of that.
Every time you speak, I think it's either awesome or awful. Like, it sounds so incredible and then so brutal at the same time. And I guess that's kind of the whole thing with rally riding, isn't it? You're doing this incredible thing, but you're also so out on a limb and so vulnerable. Yeah, it's awesome. Chris, final question. What next for Dakar? Where next? Any little things you can share with us?
Well, they're going to announce the route for next year in about 4 days' time.
In 4 days' time?
So
stay tuned.
I could tell you, but then I have to kill you all. Obviously.
Okay.
So that's to be a bit.
Here.
I mean, rally raid's an extreme sport, but I think the trouble is we're kind of running out of deserts a little bit.
Right.
That's a little bit of a problem, although there's a bit of room in China. The thing is there's obviously a geopolitical element as well.
Yeah. So
what you need Vanessa said there's rallies in Europe and non-sand rallies, but the Dakar obviously has to be a sand rally. Mm-hmm. The Dakar's traditionally been itinerant, which is part of the dream, to actually go somewhere. I mean, in the old days, it went from Paris to South Africa, for example. I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon. But so it would be nice, I think, if we could go outside of Saudi Arabia. The trouble is, going through a frontier is massively complicated in those countries. But that would be nice. And then the history of the Dakar shows it's always found a new desert to go to, and it'll, I'm sure in a few years' time it'll go off
with
somewhere else, China.
Digital road books and...
Yeah, Mexico. So there's the route, and I think then the other thing, the big thing that they're looking at, and Vanessa's given you a good idea of the problematic, is the safety. Yeah. We need to... the airbag, that you have to wear the airbag, the airbag that is compulsory on the Dakar and now apparently on most rallies has been a huge, well, literally a lifesaver. That's other things. Speed limit, I'm not at all convinced about. I think 150. If you look at the statistics, people kill themselves at 80 kilometres an hour, not at 160. So I think the difference between 160, 170, you can max out at, what have you, the fastest you go 180 on your bike?
No, I haven't got the balls.
No, well, it can go 180. So
I've been 145.
Well, that's fast.
Which is fast.
Yeah, it is fast.
When you're off-road and you don't know what's coming.
Oh, hell.
It's not like you've done a lap before, you're just blind.
I don't think speed's an issue. I think training, I think people need to realise if they're doing a rally that they need to start with something reasonable. I mean, I've got a lot of admiration for Vanessa, but I couldn't recommend going straight into a Qatar Baja. It's just...
I did say that. I jumped in the deep end.
I mean, that's my job, is to try and help people find an intelligent route into it. So do a European one, see if you like it. Do a sand Baja, see how you get on with that. Build up slowly. You need to be super fit, and you need to have good bike skills. Obviously, the more fitness you have, the less you wear your body out, so the sharper you are. The more bike skills you have, the less you wear your body out, so you're into that, So if you do want to do rally, and I think it's a fantastic sport, and I think you'll experience emotions. Obviously, Vanessa's given you a good idea of the roller coaster. Interesting, I'll just add, because you've got the competitors, but you've got on a Dakar Bivouac maybe 4,000 people. So you've got maybe 500 competitors, but you've got all the mechanics. And they're also living, to be a mechanic, Vanessa said about, she brings the bike in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she gets up at 6 o'clock, and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
So those people are also having an extreme experience.
Yeah.
I sleep 3 hours a night. I worry all day and all night about my riders. So I think one of the fascinating things about rallies at any level is you go outside your comfort zone. And at the end of 3 weeks together with people that you've possibly never met before, you'll know them like you will never know other people. And I think that's the charm of it, and the charm of being able to share. You can be queuing next to Peter Ensel in your bivouac, and he'll have a chat with you. How was your day? And so these are fascinating emotions to experience. Yeah. And I hope the future is good and safe.
Yeah. And Vanessa, what's your next rally?
I am going big. The January Africa Eco Race. So full 14-day moving bivouac, 6,500 kilometers. I feel ready. I've done a lot of training. I'm fit. My navigation I'm very proud of that. I'm accurate. I'm not necessarily the fastest out there, but I did come 25th in my last one. Might have mentioned that already. I'm quite proud of myself.
You should be.
Because I've been putting the work in, and I'm going to go for the big one.
Awesome.
So I'm very excited by that.
Guys, thank you both so much. It's been great to have you. Thank you both. We're good. You happy?
Thank you, everyone.